My beloved child, somewhere tonight, a letter exists that was never meant to be seen by anyone but you. It was written slowly, with trembling pauses between sentences, by someone who kept stopping to ask themselves whether telling the truth would bring you closer or close the door forever. And hidden inside those ordinary-looking words is a second message, one they could not bring themselves to write plainly. The strange part is not that they wrote it. The strange part is that they believe the meaning will disappear if too much time passes. The room around them was quiet when they began. A single lamp cast a pale circle across the table, leaving the corners in shadow. Their phone lay face down beside them, silent but impossible to ignore. More than once, they reached for it, thinking they might abandon the letter and simply call you. Each time, fear stopped their hand. A call would demand an immediate answer. A letter allowed them to confess without watching your expression change. They started with your name. Then they crossed it out. Not because they had written it incorrectly, but because seeing your name at the top made everything suddenly real. It reminded them of the first time they heard it spoken in a room full of people and somehow noticed it above every other sound. It reminded them of a moment you may have forgotten, a moment when you looked at them without suspicion, without asking them to prove anything, and they felt understood before they had explained themselves. That memory became the first line of the letter. They wrote, "You once made me feel safe without knowing I was afraid." Then they stared at those words for a long time. You may wonder what they were afraid of. It was not simply rejection. Rejection would have been painful, but clear. What frightened them more was the possibility that you might love them, yet still be unable to trust what they offered. They knew they had given you reasons to question them. Their silence had looked like indifference. Their distance had looked like a decision. Their hesitation had made you feel as though you were standing alone in something that was supposed to belong to both of you. But the letter reveals that their silence was never empty. Inside that silence, they had been having entire conversations with you. They imagined what you might say if they admitted how deeply they cared. They imagined your questions, your anger, your quiet disbelief. They practiced answers while driving alone, while lying awake, while standing beneath running water so no one could hear them speaking your name. Yet whenever the real opportunity came, the words disappeared. Something about your presence made honesty feel too powerful to control. That is why they turned to paper. Paper would not interrupt them. Paper would not ask why they had waited. Paper would hold every contradiction without forcing them to choose the perfect explanation. But after writing the opening, they did something unexpected. They folded the page in half, pressed it beneath their palm, and nearly tore it apart. A memory had entered the room. It was the memory of the last time they felt you pulling away. Perhaps you did not announce it. Perhaps you simply became quieter. You stopped reaching with the same warmth. You answered, but no longer offered more than necessary. There was a change in the way your energy met theirs, and although they pretended not to notice, it unsettled them. For the first time, they understood that you might truly learn to live without them. That realization changed the tone of the letter. Their next words were no longer careful. They wrote, "I thought I needed more time, but I was really waiting for courage to arrive without being invited." It is an honest sentence, but it is not the hidden message. The hidden message begins beneath it, disguised within a story about a rainy afternoon. They described a day when the sky turned gray before sunset. They had been walking alone when the rain came suddenly, sending strangers beneath awnings and into nearby shops. They could have taken shelter, but instead they remained outside, letting the rain soak through their clothes. A song was playing faintly from somewhere, a melody connected to you, though they never explained why. In the letter, they wrote that the rain made them remember your laughter. But what they did not write directly was that they cried there. No one could tell because their face was already wet. They stood beneath that darkening sky and finally admitted to themselves that they had not been protecting their heart from you. They had been protecting themselves from the responsibility of loving you well. Loving you would require more than longing. It would require consistency. It would require an apology with changed behavior behind it. It would require them to stop using old wounds as permission to create new ones. That afternoon became the moment they began changing. Not visibly, not all at once, and not in a way you could easily recognize. The change started privately. They began noticing the habits that had caused distance between you. They saw how often they withdrew when emotions became serious. They noticed how they expected you to understand feelings they had never clearly expressed. They remembered moments when you asked for reassurance and they gave you logic instead, as though love could be reduced to an explanation. The letter contains a confession about one of those moments. You had asked them a simple question. It may have sounded casual, but underneath it was a deeper need. You wanted to know whether they saw a place for you in their future. Instead of answering with tenderness, they avoided the question. They changed the subject, made a joke, or gave you a vague response that left you more uncertain than before. They remembered your face afterward. That expression has stayed with them. In the letter, they admit they knew what you were really asking. They understood that you were not demanding a promise carved in stone. You were asking whether your heart was safe to keep investing. You were asking whether the connection meant as much to them as it meant to you. They wanted to say yes. But they were afraid that saying yes would create something they could lose. So they gave you uncertainty and nearly lost you because of it. When they reached this part of the letter, they stopped again. The clock had moved far beyond midnight. The house had settled into deep silence. Outside, a vehicle passed, briefly washing the walls with moving light. They watched the brightness cross the room and vanish, and the moment seemed to carry a warning. Some chances illuminate your life only briefly before moving on. That is when they began writing faster. They told you about the saved messages they still read. The photograph they pretend not to revisit. The small detail about you they remembered when everyone else had forgotten. They confessed that your absence does not feel dramatic to them. It feels specific. It is reaching for their phone when something happens and realizing they no longer know whether they are allowed to tell you. It is hearing a phrase you would have laughed at and feeling the silence where your laughter should be. It is walking into a familiar place and noticing that the room seems rearranged without you, even when nothing has physically changed. Still, none of this is the hidden message. The hidden message is buried in the way certain sentences begin. They chose each opening word carefully. At first glance, the paragraphs appear to be simple memories. But the first word of one paragraph connects to the first word of another. They created a trail through the letter, hoping you would feel that something unusual was there even before you understood it. Why hide the truth this way? Because they do not know whether they deserve to ask directly. They are afraid that a clear request might place pressure on you. They do not want their regret to become another burden you must carry. So they concealed the question inside the letter, giving you the freedom to discover it or pass over it. And yet they secretly hope you will notice. They hope you will pause when the rhythm changes. They hope you will read certain lines twice. They hope your heart will recognize the pattern before your mind does. Near the end, they describe a door. It is not a symbolic door invented for poetry. It is a real door, connected to a real place where the two of you once stood together. Perhaps it belonged to a cafe, an apartment, a workplace, or a quiet building you both remember. They write about the sound it made when it closed behind you. They remember standing on opposite sides for a few seconds, separated by wood and glass, neither of you knowing that the moment would later feel important. They almost opened it again. They almost followed you. But they told themselves there would be another chance. The letter admits that they have been living inside that mistake ever since, believing tomorrow would always wait for them. This is why the hidden message is fading. Not because ink is literally vanishing from the page, but because the situation around the letter is changing. A decision is approaching. They have been offered an opportunity that could take them farther away. It may involve a move, a new responsibility, or a path that would make reconnecting far more difficult. They have not accepted it yet. They gave themselves until morning. The letter was written before that deadline. And what happens next depends on whether they believe there is still something unfinished between you. As the final pages began to fill, their handwriting changed. The letters became less controlled. Some words leaned sharply. Others were pressed so deeply into the paper that the marks could be felt from the opposite side. They were no longer writing the version of themselves they wanted you to see. As the final pages began to fill, their handwriting changed. The letters became less controlled. Some words leaned sharply. Others were pressed so deeply into the paper that the marks could be felt from the opposite side. They were no longer writing the version of themselves they wanted you to see. They were writing from the place that had spent too long pretending it could remain untouched. They confessed that they had once mistaken your patience for permanence. They thought your kindness meant you would always understand. They assumed that because the bond had survived confusion before, it could survive endless delay. But your heart was never created to wait without truth. Your compassion was not permission for them to remain emotionally absent. This realization is what pushed them toward the final paragraph. They wrote your name again. This time, they did not cross it out. They followed it with a sentence that frightened them more than anything else on the page. I am not asking you to forget what happened. I am asking whether something honest can still begin after it. Then came the coded lines. The first began with, please. The next began with, look. Another began with, before. Then, I. Then, leave. Separated, the words seem ordinary. Together, they form the first part of the hidden message. Please look before I leave. But there are more paragraphs. The next words are harder to find because they are not placed at the beginnings. They appear at the ends of sentences, where emotion tends to soften and readers often move quickly. They were positioned there deliberately, like quiet footsteps leading deeper into the truth. Still. Choose. Us. Those 3 words transform the entire letter. Please look before I leave. Still choose us. Yet even this is not the biggest revelation. Because on the final page, beneath the place where they signed their name, they added one last line in smaller handwriting. They stared at it for nearly 10 minutes before writing it. The sentence contains the reason the letter was never delivered, the reason they are still awake, and the reason the decision waiting at sunrise feels impossible. Their hand hovered above the paper. Then they wrote, "I know what I want now, but I need to know whether your silence means goodbye or whether you have been waiting for me to finally say this." Afterward, they folded the letter carefully and placed it inside an envelope. But they did not write your address. Instead, they wrote a date on the front. Tomorrow's date. The envelope is now resting beside their phone. And just moments ago, the screen lit up with your name not because you called, but because they had opened an old message from you, one containing a sentence they had misunderstood when you first sent it. They read it again. This time, they understood. Your words were not closing the door. They were telling them exactly how to find their way back. Their breath caught. Their hand moved toward the envelope. But before they could decide whether to send the letter, another message appeared on the screen, one that changed everything they believed about why you had gone silent. And the person who sent it was someone neither of you expected to speak. My beloved child. The message that appeared on the screen was not long. It contained only a few sentences, yet every word carried the weight of months that neither of you had been able to explain. It came from someone who had quietly witnessed pieces of your story from the outside, someone who had seen the misunderstandings grow while believing they would eventually disappear on their own. But now, realizing that silence had become more dangerous than honesty, they chose to speak. The message simply said, "You've both been protecting each other from pain, and in doing so, you've both mistaken love for distance." They never stopped caring. They only stopped believing you still wanted to hear it. For a long moment, your soulmate couldn't move. The room felt impossibly still. The envelope remained on the table, their hand resting gently upon it as though it contained their entire future. Every memory returned not as a burden, but as a series of small moments they finally understood correctly. They remembered the conversations that ended too soon. The smiles that hid exhaustion. The pauses that were filled with hope instead of rejection. The goodbye that was never truly meant to be forever. For the first time, they realized that both of you had been reading the same story from opposite ends. You believed their silence meant they no longer cared. They believed your quietness meant you had finally given up. Neither belief was true. Both hearts had been waiting. Both hearts had been afraid. Both hearts had quietly whispered the same wish into countless ordinary days. If only they knew. That realization changed everything. Instead of searching for perfect words, your soulmate unfolded the letter one final time. They read every sentence aloud. Some made them smile. Others brought quiet tears. Not tears of despair, but tears that come when someone finally stops running from the truth. Then they reached the hidden message once more. Please look before I leave. Still choose us. They smiled softly. The hidden message had never been about convincing you. It had been reminding themselves to stop leaving emotionally whenever life became uncertain. The greatest distance had never been measured in miles. It had been measured in unspoken honesty. At that moment, they picked up a pen again. Not to erase anything. Not to rewrite the past. But to add one final paragraph. It became the shortest paragraph in the entire letter. I don't expect yesterday to change. I only hope tomorrow has room for two people who have finally learned how to tell the truth. They folded the paper carefully. This time, they wrote your name on the envelope with steady hands. No hesitation. No crossing it out. No fear. Only gratitude. Outside, the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon. The world looked different not because everything had magically changed overnight, but because hope always changes the way morning feels. Every sunrise carries a quiet invitation. To forgive. To understand. To begin again. Some journeys are not delayed because love is absent. Sometimes they are delayed because two hearts must grow into the people they were always capable of becoming. Growth often happens in silence. Healing often happens where no one is watching. And when those unseen seasons finally bear fruit, even ordinary moments begin to feel extraordinary. Perhaps the greatest miracle in this story was never the letter itself. It was the courage behind it. Courage to admit mistakes. Courage to release pride. Courage to choose honesty over fear. Those are the moments that transform relationships. Those are the moments that open doors no force could ever unlock. Remember this, beloved child. Real love is not proven by never making mistakes. It is revealed by the willingness to grow after recognizing them. It is revealed when compassion becomes stronger than pride. It is revealed when forgiveness becomes more powerful than fear. No relationship written with sincerity is built upon perfection. It is built upon countless quiet decisions to understand each other again and again. If two hearts continue choosing kindness, humility, patience, and truth, even seasons of separation can become chapters that deepen love instead of destroying it. So let this fictional story leave you with something lasting. Never assume silence tells the whole story. Never believe fear deserves the final word. Never underestimate what one honest conversation can heal. Sometimes the words that change everything have been waiting inside someone's heart for a very long time. And sometimes all it takes is one brave moment for those words to finally find their way home. May your heart always recognize the beauty of honesty. May you find peace where confusion once lived. May your path be filled with wisdom, gentle courage, meaningful connections, and the quiet confidence to speak love while there is still time. May hope guide your steps, compassion shape your choices, and light accompany you through every new beginning. And if this fictional inspirational story touched your heart today, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need a little hope. Leave a comment with the words, "I choose hope," and let that simple reminder encourage others who are walking their own journey. Until we meet again, may peace fill your heart, may love strengthen your spirit, and may every new sunrise remind you that beautiful chapters are always waiting to be written.